Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm terrific. It's really nice to see you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Ann. This is Kyle. We're with Baird and Warner's Gold Coast office. We sell real estate in downtown Chicago, and we love to talk about real estate every week. And we haven't been here for a couple of weeks, so we're excited. There's lots to talk about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Anne
go ahead.
Anne has punished herself and moved into the basement.
Yes, I am in the basement. You can see behind me. This platform is saying that we're not supposed to use special backgrounds. So you get to see raw and live the mechanicals of my basement today, as opposed to Kyle's beautiful office in the Gold Coast. So everybody, today we're going to talk about stats. Guess what? We have stats through the end of the first half of the year. We also are going to talk about some things that people don't talk about very much, and that is, let's get into the nitty-gritty of parking, the nitty-gritty of appraisals, and the nitty-gritty of assessments. We have lots to talk about today. And so I guess we should just go ahead and start off with our stats, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, bear with me. I'm going to remove everything at the top so you can see better and see every last detail of what's going on. As always, we talk about the lakefront communities, houses first. 120 homes closed in the lakefront communities last month. 90 are under contract, which is down a little, purely inventory, folks, because look at this, only 177 for sale. Isn't that crazy? And this month in 2020, there were 505. You know, you can see every dot is this month. So,
Yep.
You know,
compare it or apples to apples.
Apples to apples, baby. Yep. Okay. We're now up to 1,475,000. Look at to the right. They just keep going up, up, up because there's no inventory. That's only 2 months worth of supply. And based on prices, I changed my price ranges this time.
Oh.
Purple is 4 million and more because I really wanted to see how much it would take, because 2 million to 4 million is only 3.3 months of inventory, Kyle.
There's so much demand for that price range, which is shocking. I think people are coming to the city. I think these are people, a large part of it are people who are moving to Chicago, in the 2 to 4 million range, for jobs and things like that.
It's crazy. All right. This is year to date. So 6 months, folks. And this is in dollars this time. So if you look, because prices have increased, so obviously the increase is more than on a per unit basis, but we're up 26% with this low of inventory.
Wow.
Isn't that something? So again, I mean, a reminder to all of our viewers, as goes Chicago, does not go the nation, right?
They're different.
Attached, condos, co-ops, townhomes. 1157 closed last month. 976 are under contract. Again, we have an inventory issue. Only 826 are for sale. So look, I mean,
1,826.
826.
There's a lot of, we have 1,826. Is it?
Yeah.
I think you said 800.
No, 1,800.
Okay. You.
Whatever.
800. I'm like, holy.
Don't listen to my words. Just watch the screen.
Worse. Yes.
But yeah, look how bad that is. Holy camoly. Okay. And again, 2.2 months of inventory. And again, I was a little like pushing forward on inventory. If you go to 2 million or more, it's only 7.6 months of inventory. Now, granted, there's some shadow inventory with new construction, you know, like the Cirrus and One Chicago, but not a lot of new construction. So I don't think that's impacting it a lot.
What do you think about the higher priced homes being on the private network? Or does this pick up also private network?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think it does. So there may be that they're more tucked away in the private.
That could be too. Yeah. We'll look at that for next week. 460,000 is now the median price. Again, all-time high. Yikes. Okay, and if we look at numbers here, 3.4 billion attached properties sold year to date is up 9.5 versus last year 8.9% up. Okay, this is as of Friday. Freddie Mac's rates were 6.67. We're down a little bit. Median rent $2,100. down 11%. It's basically $2.81 per square foot to rent a property here. If you look at it by bedroom, 2 bedrooms, $24.75, and near north is the highest again at $29.84.
You know, I've been hearing renters talking about how high rents seem, that they're really, really high. So, you know, that seems achievable when you compare it to like New York.
Well,
but
keep in mind, when I give you these Zumper stats, it's not the lakefront communities. It's everything in Chicago.
Oh, see, people.
So it's only when we go to the neighborhood stats. And then even when we say near north at 2,900 as a median, that's including all the studio apartments.
Yeah.
And you know, we have a lot in the near north.
So people, rents are higher than the stats show.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. But again, everybody, if you're thinking about renting and you want to save a couple pennies, reach out to a realtor and rent a condo as opposed to going to these apartment buildings, because they are so much more on a price per square foot basis.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so that's that. You ready to talk about, what would you like to talk about first?
Let's talk about the most expensive thing, assessments, and then we'll go into parking, which is sort of associated with it.
Sounds good. All right.
You got to bring me up.
Oh, beam me up, Scotty. Is that where you're going?
That's where we're going. So HOA assessments. So everyone gets concerned. HOA means homeowner assessment. I mean, homeowner association. And sometimes people refer to it as the HOA is the homeowner's assessment, but it usually means homeowners association. But what determines the amount of an assessment? Really, what should go into your assessment are two components. One is your share of the operating expenses for the year based on the budget of the association, plus an amount for funding the capital reserve. So that tends to be what goes into it. Utilities, group utilities, like cable, internet, and some buildings do gas. For example, 77 East Walton, where I have a listing, has gas included in there, so the gas range. They never include electricity unless you're in a co-op. I think they bill you together.
Yes.
For the electricity based on your usage. And really, what will help determine how high your assessments are really the number of units in the association, how broadly you can spread those costs, the operating costs of the association, and then the size and location of the particular unit. So higher floors tend to have higher assessments. Their units are considered more valuable, thus they get a higher percentage of the share of the big pool of costs, and then certain tiers based on the value of the view. So it's the size and the view or tier that will determine the value of the unit, and that will go into apportioning the assessment among unit owners. So
right. We can always tell that because in the condo declarations for a property, it'll have percent ownership. And the percent ownership determines the assessment. Percent ownership is derived from height, view, square footage.
You know, it's interesting because some people say percent ownership means in the MLS how many units are being rented, and it doesn't. Your point. Insights from the near north side. These are just from 8008, which is where Ann did a lot of this research, and she got some great stats. And we just looked at the near north side. Average cost per square foot so this is trying to take into account just size of the unit, not tier necessarily, but size of the unit, is just under $1 per square foot you should expect to pay. And when I go back to operating, the operating budget, the cost for operating the building, really, people, it comes down to staff. Your biggest line item in an operating budget for an homeowners association will be the number of staff members you have, 24-hour doorman, engineering staff and their hours, parking staff if you have them. All of that will go into the HOA. So for this, and our the near north side has a lot of condo buildings with 24-hour doorman. So this is good for helping determine average cost per square foot. So it's just under $1. The range is incredible. 282 will be for one without a doorman and probably a studio. And 14,000. The 14,000 one, is that 9 Walton? No,
it is.
It's the Palmolive, the duplex Palmolive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Buildings with the highest assessments will not shock you. Trump Tower, which has a lot of staff, it has a lot of amenities, and it's a relatively new building. It's at $3.74 per square foot. The Ritz-Carlton Residences, which is also known as 118 East Erie, is $1.85. And I thought it was interesting that a 33 East Cedar Street, which are just 1-bedroom apartments, was so high. I wonder if it's so high right now because they've got probably a large reserve funding going on.
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know.
I don't know the details on
it. It's a mid-century building, and it may be gearing up for some projects. I don't know. That is Kyle speculating because it seems mighty high for how many 1-bedroom units. A lot of units over which to spread the assessment. Newest buildings have the most amenities.
I will make one exception here. The St. Regis just sold a unit there, 2,100 square feet. The assessments were like $1,850 a month. Isn't that so? It was less than $1 per square foot for a very expensive building.
Well, let's go back to that building. So most condo buildings are a condo building, and they may have a little bit of commercial space. A number of buildings, including the St. Regis, are comprised of huge amounts of commercial space and smaller amounts of residential space.
Right.
So
and the hotel.
Well, the hotel is commercial.
Yeah. Right. No, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that absolutely. I think they run the numbers somehow so that hotel helps more to pay for the assessments.
Well, it does because they're not responsible for the entire exterior of the building.
Right.
So you are paying essentially for the guts of the building, the stuff that you use, the pipes, and it's a new building. So they probably, they may have also, the developer may have created a reserve.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I don't know how the budget works. I'm just pointing that out.
No. That's great insight. And so for example, 161 East Chicago, which has a ton of commercial space and has been undergoing some projects for which they did a special assessment. A lot of the special assessment was paid, not the special assessment, a lot of the project funding included parts of the building that were also paid for by the other associations, the commercial space, the parking, et cetera. So it wasn't as big a nut for the condo association to pay. The project was bigger, and the other associations contributed to funding of that project. So that brought down the cost to the condo association.
Right.
My building, which is 100% owned by the association and the owners, any project is fully funded by the association itself. So that just gives you a sense.
Yeah.
So newer buildings have the most amenities, and older buildings are, many older buildings are undergoing significant projects. We just finished a riser project. And so the homeowner's assessment will include a higher reserve contribution to build up reserves again. So, you really have to dive into it when you're and we help you with this. Dive into the association's assessment to get a sense of what's really going on here.
Right.
That's it.
So we were talking that size matters. Yes, size matters.
People.
Here you've got a sense of the range of assessments in near north based on the number of bedrooms, and the count here is the study that we did, and so this is all within the last year. High-rise buildings only for this. You saw 233 recently. When we broke it down into high-rise only, this is the range that you got. Interesting. It says the jump from 3 to 4 bedrooms is particularly dramatic. I think that's because, you tend to see 4 bedrooms more in these co-ops that have higher service and fewer units, wouldn't you say?
Are you pulling co-ops into that too?
Oh, thank you. No, you're right. No. So a 4+ bedroom would be a luxury building.
These are luxury buildings for getting into.
Yes, I did pull only condos for this. Thank you. Okay. And then we talked about price per square foot. We talked about most expensive, and we talked about what's typically included. But I did want to include this slide, which is when viewing assessment figures, and a lot of people out there use these platforms to search for properties, and they'll say, I only want condos that are less than $1,000 a month or whatever. But I want to give you a few caveats here. First of all, check and see if heat and air are included, because if heat and air are included, then you're not going to have that additional fee. Now, there are some buildings where you're paying for your own electric heat, or, they have their own hot water heaters in the units, like 1212 Lakeshore. But check what's included in the assessment, I guess is what I'm going to say. Now, the other thing that's really tricky, and this, when you're looking at properties, sometimes it'll say parking included, parking not included. Well, when they figure out what that assessment is, this to be true, Kyle, sometimes those agents don't include the parking assessment in the assessments, right? And then the other trick sometimes they do to try to make it look artificially low is they won't include cable and internet, even though cable and internet are required for every resident to pay. And so Kyle and I always get copies of the assessments, and we clarify with our sellers. And in the broker remarks, it's always broken out by us, and hopefully the other agents are breaking it out, but that's in broker remarks. That's not what you buyers are seeing. Right. So just wanted to say that. And then finally, you brought this up earlier, Kyle. Oftentimes they have a pocket of money going to reserves. It's not just the operating expenses and then a little overage going into reserves. They've really, decided a good chunk of money is going to go to reserves, and that's also in the assessments. And then finally, some buildings include parking in the assessments. Now, please overlook my typo because I was doing this late last night. The building on the left is 1100 Lakeshore. The building on the right is 1110 Lakeshore, right next to one another.
Neighbors. Built about the same time, too.
Yeah. Okay. The unit number is incorrect. I think the one, I don't know. If you care, DM me, I'll tell you the real unit numbers. But bottom line, 30S sold for $830. The other one is available for $740. They're almost identical in square footage, but 1100's $2,028 per month. 1110 is $2,954. Now, don't you think, Kyle, a lot of people will dismiss 1110, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, that's too much, I don't want to pay it. But parking's included in that $2,954, and 5,800 is reserved, so you're not going to have a special assessment because they've done a lot of work on this building and it's really in tip-top shape now. But look, so really the base is 2,333, including parking for 1110, and then heat's included. So
I'm going to say this about heat, and for both of these buildings. both of these buildings have those in-window machines. So heat is technically included, but you pay to replace those in-window units when they die. So it's really not included.
Yeah.
And you have to use electricity to generate heat. So heat is made available to you. It
Yeah.
is not necessarily included. The only buildings, let's be honest, people, the only buildings where heat is included are radiator buildings, buildings with radiator heat.
Right, because even if you have a 2-pipe or a 4-pipe system, you have fan coils or heat pumps that you must replace at some point.
Or that you have to use energy to expel the heat.
Right, so you're paying electricity for the fan to kick it out into the air.
Yes.
You're right. Yeah. Very good point.
The only buildings that have heat included are ones that have radiator heat.
Right.
Though, for example, the one I live in, we have convector systems where hot water goes through it and all you pay for is the electricity. And heat really is included except for the electricity. And then I tell them how much the electricity costs. And the electricity costs are very low especially people, if you get those LED lights. My electricity has dropped enormously. My bills have dropped enormously.
Woo-hoo, tip of the day, go LED.
All right, next. Parking.
Oh, okay.
Don't we want to go to parking?
Yeah. Here are my thoughts on parking. Okay. All right. This is really difficult to read, and I apologize for that. But in the MLS, you can actually see parking for rent. These are the only ones right now for rent in the near north on a monthly basis. Okay. What we really want to talk about are those for sale. So here's currently for sale at 111 Chestnut, range in price from $25,000 to $52,000, and they'll describe them on the right there. Here's a quick look at Lake Point Tower. You can get an indoor covered there for 3 spots for $117,000.
Wait. Lake Point Tower? That's a rental garage. Isn't it a rental garage?
Well, they must have some that you can buy.
Maybe, but it's valet.
There you go.
You have a valet park your car. So you've got costs on top.
I wanted to share this with you because I currently have a unit at 130 Garland, unit 4101, and this is what got the conversation started between Kyle and I, that it doesn't include parking. However, there are lots of spots available for parking. And then the question, because in most buildings, well, we'll get to that. There aren't enough parking spaces for the units. And so you almost are defensive buying. In 130 Garland, there are a bunch of parking spots left over that people are willing to sell. And they range in price here from $25,000 to $65,000, okay, depending on what floor level, how big they are. Are they in the flat part or the slanted part? But the question is, if you're buying my unit at 130 Garland, it's a 3-bedroom for about $1 million, a little over $1 million. Do you want to buy parking with it, or would you rather rent? And so we got into this whole conversation. And here are what they've sold for separately between $18,500 and $60,000. If you're going to buy a unit, that's what they closed. Here's what they were active for. So then I did, look what I did here, Kyle. I geeked out. I went to our favorite app, Palm Agent, and put in, okay, if I'm going to rent it for $25,000 or $250,000, I'm going to rent for $250,000, or I'm going to buy it for $20,000 with 10% down. And really, you don't go 10%. If you're buying it separately, you're paying cash. But I just wanted to say, if you took that $20,000 and put it into the mortgage, what would it look like? It takes you 10 years to break even. So it's interesting.
20 years.
Huh?
20 years.
20 years. Yes. Thank you. 20 years. And I have gotten, and you probably have too, this conversation from buyers. Why should I necessarily buy parking if, right? If it's so, inexpensive to rent and I don't have to outlay the cash, and that's only on a $20,000, right? But, and you know the argument as well as I do, so you make the argument for why a buyer should buy the parking.
It enhances the value of your unit.
Makes it easier to sell.
Makes it easier to sell. Though I think that will change over time as we get further and further away from cars. I live in a building that used to have people would have like there'd be a couple with 3 cars, a family with 5 cars. They'd all have all these cars. And now there are a lot of people who have no cars. Yeah. And they just Uber and taxi and bike and walk. So I wonder if it does make sense right now to buy the parking if you can't get it thrown in at a good price. There are a number of associations where you are not allowed to rent it to a third party. You have to either rent it to somebody in the building, right? And non-owners, non-unit owners cannot own the parking. So they have to sell it with the unit when they're selling the unit. They can always, when you own it, rent it out to somebody else in the building if you don't want to use it for yourself. But they have to sell. Well, then it's for free.
Right. You bring up a really good point on that. But the other thing too is I was showing units on the MLS. It's really hard to tease out exactly what the price of a parking space is because so often we will see, a unit listed for $550,000 and the parking is $20,000. When they ultimately negotiate it, they may negotiate the whole package for $560,000. So then how do you even tease out what part is parking, what part is condo? So it's a little difficult, don't you agree?
I do agree. And I have counseled clients, and they have not listened to me, to include the deeded parking in the price. Yeah. Because you do have to, you don't want to stick around with an extra parking space. It's just it's like a thing. God, you got to pay for whatever. And because that's how it's going to come to you in an offer. They're going to want the parking thrown in. So put it in there and say, and I'm including parking. So it drives up the value and price it into the unit. People seem to think that that's not going to work, but it does work.
Well, again, if there are savvy agents and savvy buyers who aren't necessarily just searching for the smallest price unit, they really thoughtfully look at all the options and the benefits of every unit, then you're right. Yeah. That's exactly what should happen. So,
yeah. All right. Appraisals?
Yeah. You want me to beam you up?
If you don't mind.
There you go.
Okay. So people, there are a number of neighborhoods right now that are so hot, that buyers are starting to think about ways to make their offers stand out. And one of the ways that people make their offers stand out is through something called an appraisal waiver. So I thought we'd talk about appraisals, the role that they play in real estate, et cetera. So appraisals really come in when you're going to get a mortgage for your purchase. Sometimes you'll make a cash offer, but you're planning to get a mortgage anyway. And still you'll have to do an appraisal because the bank wants to know the value of the property that you're purchasing. But they are super important in ones where one of the contingencies in the contract is that a mortgage is the ability to get a mortgage. I recently had a buyer looking for a house in Lincoln Park, and boy, that was hard. And most of the ones that we looked at and a couple that we bid on, we were among 20 other bidders. And so ours, we couldn't get it. But then we found a house that nobody was bidding on and negotiated a price. And we included in our offer a appraisal rider, which had in there, because we were buying closer. The reason why there weren't so many people looking for this property is it was overpriced. And so we put in an appraisal rider, and the appraisal, and we went under contract, and the appraisal came in short about 13,000 more than the amount that we agreed to swallow in the event that the appraisal came up short. So the appraisal rider form says it has options. One, you can back out if it doesn't appraise for the sale price. You can just get out of the deal, buyer. You're out of the transaction. It also then says that you're confident that prices are rising in the neighborhood and it will come up, and I'm willing to cover a certain amount of the gap between the appraised value and the purchase price. And
that's what you did, right?
Yes, we had an amount that we were willing to cover, and the appraisal came in lower. You know, the gap was larger than the amount we agreed to swallow. And so we had to think, do we cancel the contract? It was entirely our choice. We canceled the contract, and the seller played hardball. And so, it was going to be hard to find a house as great as this house, and this house was great and great for this family. So they agreed to swallow it, but it's tricky. So appraisal riders are, and the need to appraise is tricky for both buyers and sellers. One, you have to decide, do I have enough money that I can cover the gap? My people were lucky that they weren't they were financing a smaller portion so the gap didn't matter as much. Their loan is larger, but didn't matter as much. For the seller, if you've got a situation where the transaction falls apart, that impacts you're going back on the market.
Right.
And so very often parties, buyers and sellers, will negotiate a way to shrink the gap or to close the gap or to bring it down to the gap, erase the gap. So, but it's really tricky for sellers. For sellers to play hardball, you are risking having your property. You might have to drop the price at least that amount. So it's what experiences have you had, Anne?
Yeah, I had it happen a couple weeks ago too with a property. But here are a couple of things to think about. If you're the buyer and you go in, and you can either pay more money out of pocket and finance the same amount, or instead of doing like a 30% down, maybe you do 28% down or 27% down or something like that, right? So there are different ways you can deal with the gap between the appraised amount and the amount of the loan. My situation was a 3% down.
Ooh.
And the list price was $220. The agreed upon price was $210, and the appraisal came in at $198. Ouch. So because the buyer didn't have a lot down, they ended up settling in between. But woo. Yeah. So, and it's still not closed. We're still trying to work it out. So, I mean, we're getting the highest price per square foot, in the building in history.
That where you are in the amount down, if you have to swallow more of that gap, it might affect your interest rate.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why sellers are always looking for a high percent down, because it does make a difference.
It does make a difference.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's all I have. Yeah.
Good to see you, Kyle, as always.
Always. Safe travels home.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.